So let's assume that Biden, what he campaigned on, that he's going to take a more conservative approach. To me, that's not factored in. And this isn't just like what he was saying, because we have now New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, Massachusetts rolling back. They're rolling back, even though if you're outside the danger zone, which means if you're over 70 or if you have underlying condition, the chance of you dying from COVID is less than 0.6%. And it goes lower every day, even though we get more tests, more people are going out there. Obviously,
All right.
COVID cases are going to rise. We know that. It's fine. But we all know people who had COVID. Most of them are okay. If we decide to close the economy, because Jeffries does a great tracker that I posted on my Twitter account at Frank Curzio that shows everything in terms of traffic, like whether it's foot traffic, whether it's transit, and all these things for the week over week, it was getting in terms of the percentage of the economy that's open. And it was, it's around 75-80% when you include everything. And it's been going up, right, week by week. Now you're seeing downticks. This definitely isn't factored into GDP. And people say, well, it's the states that matter. I get it. But remember, all the Republicans are together and all the Democrats are together. And if you don't follow the top guy, he's not going to have you back when it comes to election time. So do you think we could see a lot of these states roll back some of these requirements? Because I could tell you, people who own businesses, they're done. They don't want to, they're ready to work. They want to get out there. They know the statistics. If that happens, does that worry you when it comes to the markets?
It worries me from a lot of aspects, and I think that that's why they need to really get some stimulus ready before they do so. It's interesting that we saw that Germany's rolling back, UK shut down for 30 days. We see France in bad shape. Israel shut down for 3 weeks a few weeks back. El Paso, Texas is like the first to really kind of come down on a stay-at-home order. You're seeing a lot of things around the world that are questioning why this is happening. We can get into the whole discussion of, how are you counting deaths anyway, by the way? So the UK, the way they count deaths is, I believe it's if you have COVID and within 28 days later, I think it's 28, you die, it's a COVID death. So in other words, if I get COVID and 14 days later, and let's say I'm asymptomatic, 14 days later, I get hit by a bus, COVID death.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what this is. There's a couple of theories. It's the New World Order on the Build Back Better concept. And this is a kind of a globalist viewpoint of trying to take control of everybody. And maybe that's something. And I just don't think that we're going to see a shutdown unless things get really, really bad. But at the end of the day, Frank, the fact is we're closer to the potential vaccine. And even if we don't have a vaccine, a lot of the treatments are a lot better. And even if the treatments aren't a lot better, the understanding of the disease is a lot better. And therefore, it's being treated, even without some of these other interventions, a lot better. At first, people didn't know what the hell it was. So you didn't go to the doctor. And by the time it progressed, you're in bad shape. Now, if you, I don't know, you see, oh my God, I got something, right? Or my throat's right. Oh my God. I have a cough. Everybody, if I'm anywhere and I cough, everybody's like leaves the room, and it could have been just that a fly flew in my throat. And I think though that we're much more oriented to it. Some places not. But I think that there is going to be it's going to be hard pressed to really shut down the way that we did before. And even if we don't, though, we have something, I think I mentioned this to you before, that we're calling PVSD, which is post-virus stress disorder. And I don't care who you are and how much you think that this is either a hoax or it's not true. In the back of your mind is like, I'm not getting too close to that person. I'm not really shaking their hand. I'm not hugging and kissing if I don't know where they've been. I'm not going to be sharing food, right? Like the old days, hey, taste this. Here you go. Not happening anymore. So it's kind of a different world right now. And I think a lot of that does naturally stop foot traffic. But one of the things, Frank, that I think we have to say about 2020 is that there's something remarkable that happened this year. And I think it's all about the incredible amount of adaptation and I guess I would say resiliency, right? This ability, not only for companies, we talk about companies, clearly, no question about that. Snap your finger. They are now going and they're figuring out a way to do things online. They're figuring how to do takeout orders, like what happened with Chipotle, or Domino's Pizza for that matter, really ramped it up incredibly. And Burger King, et cetera. Chick-fil-A doesn't need anything because they have lines around the block no matter what they do. But you look at these companies making incredible amounts of money, realizing that, you know what, people will adapt, people will change, and they're very resilient. And people have learned to adapt. So now, instead of me worrying about stuff and running out to the store and buying all this stuff, I figure out what I need, how to get it. I can go to Amazon, I can go to this one online, I can go to that one online. I can work from home. I have now, most people probably have an office or a setup at home. They can work from home if they have to. So it's not this panic anymore, right? The panic is gone. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like during a war. If the first day you're in a city and you're getting bombed from overhead, probably it's going to be a lot different, your life, than 30 days, 60 days later, where there's still planes going over and all that shell shock is over, but you've learned to adapt and be resilient in that kind of environment. And that's where we are. We're in a war and we've learned to live within that war. Companies have done the same, learned how to work on their profitability. And of course, with the help of the government providing, has really changed the way we do things. Will we ever go back? I don't know. Frank, you going to the gym or did you buy a Peloton?
I took the plunge and I bought a Peloton. Yes.
Right.
Which is a stock. I think I was saying, I think it's going to be a good short around the 80s and wherever it's, let's just say it's a lot higher than that. But I said, wait till the momentum to stop and never stop. But that goes to my next question, Andrew. So is it the Pelotons, the Zooms, the Teladoc Health? We may start to realize, especially when it comes to real estate. I just talked to one of my best friends whose family came over here 40 years ago and bought a bunch of houses in Queens, New York. And tons of garages and everything. And he told me, he said the value of real estate's going down tremendously. He said he knows, obviously he's tied into the real estate industry. He says people have left. They're leaving in droves. They're leaving like crazy. He's like, now about 15% of the people haven't paid him rent of all his tenants. But is this kind of like a permanent change? I mean, but before you answer that, I'm gonna share an interesting stat. And this is from another researcher. I forgot who put it. I think it was Evercore, which did a survey of like the percentage of people that feel positive about going to theaters, about going to gyms, about going to restaurants and stuff, right? So I was really surprised that it was theaters. I mean, people are more scared today, right? And gyms are more scared today going to these two places than they were in May. So I mean, are we looking at permanent change here, which we're going to see in some industries, but this is still going to impact a lot of companies, positive and negative, right?
I mean, there's a lot of things you have to think about when it comes to people having this long-term concern if they've never had it. I mean, I talked to you about this yesterday, Frank, and it seems to me that either we all need to get it and somehow live through it as best as possible, or a vaccine comes has good efficacy and good results. Or we're going to be living in this fear for a long time, and it's understandable. I mean, I get it, obviously, and when you think about the theater, packing people in, and then people singing at you, and if you've ever sat close in the theater, you can see the spit coming right off of their lips the whole time. So that's obviously traveling through the air. You look at gyms, people sweating, and their bodily fluids all over the gym stuff. I don't care how much you clean that, is still a concern. And, certain restaurants and certain transportation and cruise lines, which was a petri dish for disease before this even was invented, this whole COVID thing, right? We had the norovirus was a big issue, that you're washing your hands. And they got guys singing. Have you been on a cruise lately? They got the guys singing, wash your hands, wash your hands. They got guitarists and guys, as you're coming in to eat, they're singing with mariachi bands and all this stuff. I'm not kidding either. And is that serious? And so I think it's going to be a change, maybe for the better. I think I have traveled all over Asia. And one of the first things you notice when you go to Asia is a lot of people wear masks, because they know from a pollution standpoint, as well as the potential for disease, it's important to try to either stay safe or, I guess, not give it. Now, there's a lot of mask discussions out there that they work, they don't work, they work, they don't work. In Sweden, we could bring in all this other good stuff. I don't think they hurt. They can't hurt. And I would tell you that I think that other diseases are probably going to go down, other airborne types of things will probably go down as we have a different level of hygiene and watch where we go, watch what we do, watch what we eat. That could be a better thing in the long term if you think about it. But I do think there are a lot of industries that are pretty much sunk and that are not going to be able to come back. Malls, I think CBL went bankrupt this week. You have that as an issue. Major restaurant chains, small restaurants that rely on people in-house.
I mean, these restaurants, you probably know restaurants, business owners, bar owners, right? These people need to be operating at 85% to make ends meet. And they're so even though they're open or they just reopened, and some of them at 75%, they're still below that threshold, which means it's creating even more emphasis or creating more emphasis for that stimulus package to pass, because there are a lot. I have friends own gyms and bars. They are getting crushed. They had great livings and now they're in tons of debt. I mean, we're talking about companies. We'll get to the analysts in a second. And they don't model for 80% revenue declines in 6 months. Nobody does, right? It's like, hey, 15, 20%, right? Never that.
Yep.
Now you're coming back and people are like, oh, well, it's open. They need to be open a lot more than that. And now that you're rolling this back, it's dangerous, but it just places greater emphasis on this stimulus plan because, look, we had Disney come out, and I just came from Disney. It's hard.
Yeah, you got a miserable time, right? Miserable.
It's hard to wear a mask outdoors the whole day at a park. We had sore throats. We saw people yelling at people when they took them off and they weren't supposed to. Just even when they were eating, they were in the middle of the aisle, not on the side. It just really wasn't that good of a time. But I'm with you when it comes to masks. I think, listen, if I'm 75, you should be wearing a mask. And if I see a 75-year-old, I'm going to wear a mask, and I'm wearing masks all the time indoors just to make them feel better. Because if they get it, they're at serious risk of COVID.